Namaskar. Thank you very much for inviting me to the 36th International Geeta Conference at Geeta Dham, Tinwari Tehsil, Jodhpur, to celebrate the 125th birth anniversary of His Holiness 1008, Swami HariharJi Maharaj, founder president of Geeta Dham. The subject of the conference is the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. However, the Bhagavad Gita being what it is, you cannot look at it in isolation. No chapter in the Bhagavad Gita can be looked at in isolation. From chapter 1, Adhyaya 1, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, to chapter 18, all the chapters are important and they contribute to the understanding of the Supreme Being. However, I must say that in the short time available to us, we cannot deal in detail with the 13th chapter. The 13th chapter. Okay, before that, let me explain this. At the end of every chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, every chapter, it declares that iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade, which means the samvad between Krishna, Bhagavan and Arjuna, which teaches us the Upanishad. The Upanishad teaches us the Brahma Vidya. So therefore, the entire Gita is a discussion between Krishna and Arjuna on what is Brahma Vidya, how to attain it, and how to move about it. The thing is, there are innumerable Upanishads, which are, some are big, some are small. But as far as the Bhagavad Gita is concerned, it's a essence put together in simple language for you and me who live in this world which is actually like being in the battle of Kshetra. We fight our daily battles of life. So, as Vyasa says in the beginning, Sarvo Upanishato Gavo Dugdha Gopalanandana Partho Vatsaha Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gitam Ratam Mahat. If all the Upanishads were cows, and if Krishna was the one who milked the cows, then the wise enjoy the milk, and the milk that comes is the immortal teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. So it is the essence of the Upanishad. So having said this, since the subject of this conference is the 13th chapter of the Gita, which is a distinction between Prakriti and Purusha, and the link between the two. So I'm going to go into this. In some versions start with Arjuna uvacha. Also remember that it comes after the 12th chapter, which is Bhakti Yoga. So that is understood, that without the definition of bhakti given in the Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, one cannot go to the next chapter. And the definition given is that the attributes of a bhakta have to be very important. Not enough if he sings the praises of the Lord, but cultivates the attitude of control over the senses, keeping the mind sarvatra samabuddhaya, in calmness and quietness in the midst of all circumstances, and has sarvabhuta ite rata, the welfare of all living beings in his heart. With this introduction, I'm going to start this Gita. There is in some versions there is one more Shloka which starts with Kshetra and Kshetrajna, of course, Arjuna uvacha. It's not included in many versions. Arjuna uvacha prakritim purusham chaiva kshetram kshetrajnam evacha etat veditam michchami jnanam jneyam cha Keshava. O Keshava, Prakriti and Purusha, the field and the knower of the field, knowledge and the object of knowledge, these I should like to know, O Krishna. But actually in most versions, the first sloka starts with Shri Bhagavan uvacha. If you add one more sloka, then the Bhagavad Gita will contain 701 slokas. If you don't, if you start with this Bhagavan uvacha, Shri Bhagavan uvacha, then the total number of slokas is only 700, which is the number traditionally accepted. So let's not discuss this. Let's go to the first sloka. First sloka, Shri Bhagavan uvacha. Krishna said, Idam shariram kaunteya kshetram iti abhidhiyate etadyo vettitam prahu Kshetrajna iti tadvita. Krishna said to Arjuna, this body, O son of Kunti, Kaunteya, is called the field, the Kshetra. And he who knows this, those who know, understand this, called the knower of the field as the Atman. So this body is the field, the Kshetra. Temples are also called Kshetras, which means it's a field. The word Kshetra means a field, and the deity is the supreme reality who is manifested and defined in the deity sitting inside. So what is more important, the Kshetra or the deity? Both. Because the deity manifests his capacities through the body, which is the Kshetra. Now when you say body, it also includes the mind. So the second sloka says, Kshetrajnam cha api mam vidhi sarva kshetresu bharata kshetra kshetrayor jnanam yat tat jnanam matam mama. Krishna says to Arjuna, know me, that is Krishna, as a knower of the field. Know me as the knower of the Kshetra. I am the Kshetrajna, the knower of the Kshetras, the fields. Not one field, but all fields, which means all human beings, all nature, all the other worlds beyond, they're all fields. And I am the knower of the field. Oh, Arjuna, here addressed as Bharata, the knowledge of the field and its knower. If you understand who is the knower and what is the field, this I regard as tad yat tad jnanam matam mama. I consider that as true knowledge. So, here briefly from me what the field is, of what nature and what its modifications are, whence it is, what he, the knower of the field is, and what his powers are. Tat kshetram yatchayadrikcha yadvikari yataschayat sachayo yat prabhavascha tad samashit mishrudu. Listen to me about this. I'm going to describe it to you. Now, the constituents of the field. What is the field? This has been told by the sages in many ways and very distinctly in different hymns, also in well-reasoned and conclusive expressions of the Brahma Sutra, the absolute Brahma Sutra. Rishir Bahuda Geetam Chandobhir vivida pratak Brahma Sutra Padascheva Hetumadbhir Vinishchita. Is what I said. This has been sung by the sages in many ways and distinctly, in various hymns and also in well-reasoned and conclusive expressions of the aphorisms of the absolute Brahma Sutra. Now here is the description. The 5 gross elements, Prakriti, also self-sense, the sense of self, I am, understanding also the unmanifested, because there is nature manifest and unmanifest, the 10 senses and the mind, and the 5 objects of the Panchendriyas, the senses. Further, says Krishna, Ichcha, Dvesha, Sukham, Dukkham, Samghatas Chetana Dhritihi, Etat Kshetram Samasena, Savikaram Udahritam. Desire and hatred, pleasure and pain. Note, 2 opposites. Desire and hatred, pleasure and pain, the aggregate of which is the organism. Intelligence and steadfastness described. These are all parts of the field, which is the body, the human being, and its modifications. Even the mental traits are part of the quality of the field because they are objects of knowledge. Now what is knowledge? This is the field, okay? So we need to connect the field to the knower. And for that you need knowledge. And what is knowledge? According to the 13th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, Amanitvam adhambhitvam ahimsa shantirarjavam acharya pasanam shaucham stairyam atma vinigraha. Humility. The first attribute that happens to a human being when he gets knowledge is humility. Amanitvam, absence of pride. And adhambhitvam, integrity, absence of deceit. Not saying one thing and doing another, not hiding something inside you and expressing something else. Absence of deceit, because if you're searching for the truth, you need to lead a truthful life. Then, ahimsa shantir arjavam, non-violence. Shantir, patience. Uprightness. Acharyopasanam, service of the teacher. Then, saucham, purity of body and mind. Somebody can't have a bath for 3 months and say, my mind is pure, so my body, it's okay. No. So, so please, I want to remind you again. Kshetra, Kshetrajna. Kshetra is the field. Kshetrajna is the knower, the consciousness in the field. When it comes to the human body and the mind and all its qualities are the Kshetra. And the knower, the consciousness who is aware of everything, is the Kshetrajna, the knower. And to know that, knowledge is required, to know the link between these two. And the first step in knowledge is humility, integrity, non-violence, patience, uprightness, service of the teacher, purity of body and mind, steadfastness, styrium, not one thing today, something else tomorrow, and atma vinigraha, self-control. These are essential for knowledge. Also, indriyartheshu vairagyam, ahamkara uvacha, janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha khadosanu darshanam, indifference to the objects of the senses, self-effacement. Not to say I did this, I did that. Self-effacement. And the perception of how birth, the evil of birth, because birth brings about what? All the complications. Of course, death, old age, sickness and pain. To understand this is also knowledge. These are the qualities of a person who has knowledge. Now this is important because the Gita is not just a philosophical discussion between Krishna and Arjuna. It's a practical way of how to find the knower, which is the supreme all-pervading self. Then, ashaktir anabhishvangaha putradhar gridhadishu nityam cha samachittatvam ishtanishto papatishu. Non-attachment, absence of clinging to son, wife, home and the like, and a constant equal-mindedness to all desirable and undesirable happenings. This is not what we do in life. Of course, the sannyasin has no son, wife, etc. So they must be not talking about the sannyasin, the family man. So, you go into the Upanishads, many of the rishis already had sons, wives. But while living in this world, to be free of clinging and to be equal-minded to all desirable. In this world, there is bound to be desirable happenings. There are bound to be undesirable happenings. So, to be equal-minded to all these happenings, because you cannot do anything about it. Even if you control people, you cannot control nature. One day it rains, another day it is sunlight, floods, no water sometimes, drought. There are in this life desirable and undesirable happenings in the Kshetra. Now to be equal-minded in the midst of all this is also knowledge. Then Krishna says, unswerving devotion to me with wholehearted discipline. If possible, resort to solitary places. Dislike for a crowd of people. Very difficult to practice, especially for a person who is in the role of a teacher. You have to face everyday crowds. There are people who enjoy crowds, but the one who has knowledge dislikes crowds. He may go into a crowd only if necessary. Then, before that, unswerving devotion to me. Mahicha ananya yogena bhaktiravya bicharani, wholehearted, and vivikta desha sevitam, resorting to solitary places. Aratir janasamsadi, dislike for a crowd of people. Here people are trying to attract crowds. Dislike for crowd. Constancy in the knowledge of the spirit. Understanding the knower who is sitting quietly inside. Insight into the end of the knowledge of truth. To understand what is truth and therefore the end of everything else. This is declared to be true knowledge. And anything that is different from this is non-knowledge. A jnani is one who has these qualities. If he does not have these qualities, he cannot be called a jnani. That is what they mean. Now, says Krishna, I will describe that which is to be known, and by knowing which life eternal is gained. What is that? This is the Supreme Brahman, who is beginningless and who is said to be neither existent nor non-existent, which means Non-existent because you cannot judge by any of the rules of this world, and it cannot be grasped by the five senses. So one is likely to think that it is non-existent, but it is existent. So since we cannot define it like a material object, you define it as neither existent nor non-existent. Appears non-existent but exists. Nyayam yat tat pravakshami yat jnatva amritam ashnute. Those who know this, they will attain life eternal. Anadimat param brahma. That Brahman is anadimat. Na sattan na sat uchyate, but that doesn't mean he's non-existent. With his hands and feet everywhere, with eyes, heads and faces on all sides, with ears on all sides, he dwells in the world enveloping all. So, another quality of the knower, which the one with knowledge understands, the Jnani understands, is when that truth is understood, you don't need ears or eyes or any other sense organs, because it has ears everywhere. It has faces on all sides. It hears everything. It dwells in the world and it envelops everything. Sarvam avritya tishtati is what the word used here. When the senses operate, the five sense organs, indriyas, he appears to have the qualities of all the senses, and yet he has no senses. He has no sense organs, and he is not interested in any of this enjoyment of the senses, but without him, the senses do not have the capacity to enjoy. Unattached, and yet supporting all. Free from the dispositions of Prakriti, from the gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas, gunatita, and yet enjoying the gunas. Now this is, it seems like a contradiction, but the absolute cannot be defined in any words without contradictions, because it is out of our definitions, of our idea of definitions. Sarvendriya gunabhasam sarvendriya vivarjitam asaktam sarvabhrikchaiva nirgunam gunabhoktircha. Okay. And bahir antascha bhutanam, he is without, the outside field, and within all beings, which are also fields. He is unmoving as also moving. Acharam charam evacha. You see this in other Upanishads also. Tad dure tad vatantike. He is far and yet he is so near, from the Ishavasya Upanishad. He is without and within all beings. He is unmoving as also moving. He is too subtle to be known. So subtle that he can't be known through our limited logic and reasoning. That's what it means. Not that he won't be known, but through a limited logic and reasoning, he cannot be known. Shukshmatva tad avijnayam, so subtle to be known. Durastam cha anitke cha tat. He is far away and yet he is near. He is undivided and indivisible. Please remember, talking about the knower. The Kshetrajna, not the Kshetra. He is undivided, which means indivisible, and yet it looks like he is divided among all beings. He is to be known as supporting the creatures. He is the one who destroys them. He is the one who creates them afresh. Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu vibhaktam uvacha stitam bhuta bhartir cha tajneyam grahishnu prabhavishnu cha. He is the light of all lights, said to be beyond all darkness, which means we are not talking about the light which is the absence of darkness. We are talking about the light which is also there in the darkness. Not physical light, therefore. He is the knowledge and also the object of the knowledge and the goal of the knowledge. And where does he sit? After saying all undefinable things, we have come to something where we can grasp him. So where does he sit? Hridi sarvasya dishtitam. He is seated in the hearts of all. Then we come back again in the 13th chapter to nature and the spirit. Know you, says Krishna to Arjuna, that Prakriti, nature is called Prakriti. Here the terms used are quite used in Sankhya and Yoga Darshanas. Know thou that Prakriti, nature, and Purusha, soul, are both beginningless. It's not as if Prakriti was created. Prakriti is also beginningless. From the beginning of time is going on. And also that the forms and modes are born of Prakriti. Which means Prakriti is beginningless in the sense that the sum total of all energy, which can never be destroyed, nor was it born, cannot be created and destroyed. So what are the forms and modes that we see in nature? They're all born out of the modifications of this energy. Yet the energy remains the same. Purnamada Purnamidam. Purnat Purnamaduchyate. Purnasya Purnamataya Purnameva Vashishyate. It remains Purna all the time. Prakriti is said to be the cause of effect, instrument and agent. Who is the cause? It is that Kshetrajna, the soul, the Purusha, who is the cause. And in regard to the experience of pleasure and pain, it is the Kshetra that experiences it through the five senses, but it is the soul that enjoys it. The soul in nature, soul meaning the Purusha, enjoys the modes born of nature. What is the cause of birth and death? It is attachment to the modes of enjoyment. Attachment to the good or bad modes of enjoyment is the cause of birth in good and evil conditions. The word used here is wombs, good and evil wombs. I am saying conditions. The Supreme Spirit in the body, Upadarashta, Anumantacha, Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara. Upadrashta, Anumantacha, Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara. Paramatme iti chapi yukto, Dehesmin Purusha Para. The Supreme Spirit in the body, the Kshetrajna, is the witness, the Sakshi. Also the permitter, allowing you to do what you want. The supporter of your life. Also truly the experiencer, the great Lord. And Dehismin Purusha Paraha, the great Lord and the Supreme Self. He who thus knows the Purusha and he who thus knows Prakriti, nature, together with its different modes, though he acts in many ways, he is not born again. Means living in Prakriti. Sometimes you need to adapt to the ways of Prakriti, good and bad. But it's an act in every way. And who knows the Purusha, even though he acts in this world, has no attachment, and therefore is not born again. Nasa bhuyo abhijayate. He is not born again. By meditation, now, are there different roads to salvation? How do we go about finding that Supreme Self whom we discussed? There are different roads. One, Dhyanena Atmani Pashyanti, by meditation, by dhyana, some perceive the self in the self, by the self. The self sees the self by itself. It's like the eye that sees everything, but you cannot see the eye. But because the eye is there, you see the world, therefore you know that the eye exists. This way, somewhat like this. By meditation, some perceive the self in the self by the self. Through meditation. This is Dhyana Yoga. Others, Kechid Atmanam Atmana, Anye Sankhena Yogena, others by the path of knowledge. Here the word Sankhena means knowledge, not Sankhya as a discipline or as a darsana. And others, now there is a hope for others also who have neither Sankhya nor Dhyana, but the path of working, Karma Yoga. There are yet others, Anyete Yevam Ajanata, those who don't know any of these things, ignorant of these paths. But hearing this from others, they worship the Supreme Self. They too cross beyond death, which means understand the immortal essence in them so that they are not born again by their devotion to what they have heard. Tepicha atitaranti eva mrityum shruti parayana. When they listen to these words of immortality, they also attain immortality. Whatever being is born, moving or unmoving, know this, so best of Bharatas, Arjuna, that it is come from the union of the Kshetra and the Reiteration, the union of the field and the knower of the field. He who sees the Supreme Lord abiding equally in all beings, never perishing when they perish, he verily sees everything. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinishyatsav vinashyantam yaha pashyati sa pashyati. He sees that people perish, but actually the outward forms perish. The Lord abides equally in all beings. For as he sees the Lord present everywhere equally, he does not injure anybody because he is enduring his own true self by the self. So he attains to the supreme goal. Tato yati param gatim, the highest level. He who sees that all actions are done by nature, and likewise that the self is not the doer at all, he verily sees, he really sees. Others don't see, they think they see. Akartaram sapashyati, he is the one who actually sees. When he sees that the manifold state of beings is centered in the one, and that from that just one it spreads out, when this is understood, Brahman is attained. Brahma sampadyate tadha, then only it is attained. Because this Supreme Self is imperishable, is without beginning, without qualities, so, O son of Kunti, though it dwells in the body, the Kshetra, it neither acts nor is stained, although it appears to act. Na karoti na lipyate. Neither does it do anything, though it appears to be doing. Nor does anything get stuck on it. It can't be tainted. Na lipyate. Yatha sarvagatam shaukshmyad akasham no apalipyate sarvatra avastito dehe tatha atmano apalipyate. As the all-pervading ether, Akasha is not tainted by reason of being subtle. So the self that is present in every body does not suffer any taint. as the one sun illumines this whole world, yatha prakashayati ekaha, so does the Lord of the field illumine this entire field, O Bharata. Those who perceive thus with their eye of wisdom the distinction between the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna, between the field and the knower of the field, and the deliverance of beings from nature, freeing themselves from Prakriti, attain to the supreme state. Yavidur yanti te param. Yavidur yanti te param. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Here ends the 13th chapter of the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. Namaskar.